5th of April 1965, there was a meeting of what later became the Child Poverty Action Group. Over 50 years, the group has campaigned to bring to public attention the extent of child poverty and provided practical help in the form of welfare advice. That was 50 years ago. During the recent general election, we heard little about child poverty. Was that because child poverty has disappeared? And the answer, as I'm sure you know, is no. In 1965, there were 1.9 million children living below the poverty line in Britain. Today, the figure is close to 4 million. And that child poverty is higher today than 50 years ago is part of a wider picture of increased inequality. Children are growing up in poverty because their mothers and fathers do not earn a living wage or cannot get jobs. If we look at the statistics of overall income inequality, then if we look at those statistics, we find a stark picture. Measured in looking at overall income inequality in terms of the Gini coefficient, which summarizes the extent of income differences among the population, and a score that goes from 0 when everyone has the same income to 100% at the other extreme. In the 1960s, that value of inequality was around 25%. And it had been that for quite a long time and remained that for quite a long time. But after 1980, it rose, and it rose to about 35%. And to put that in perspective, if we tried to use income tax alone to reduce inequality back to its level when the Beatles were playing, we'd have to raise all income tax rates by something like 16 percentage points, 16 pence in the pound. And if you were Chancellor of the Exchequer, going into the House of Commons, I think you'd take a very deep breath before announcing such a tax rise. So I'm afraid the fact of the matter is that income inequality in this country took a step up in the 1980s and has not fallen significantly since then. But it's only recently that this has come to be widely discussed. It was following the publication of Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century. There's been, in fact, enormous media coverage. It's attracted the attention of world leaders. The United States President, to quote Barack Obama, says that rising income inequality is the defining challenge of our time. The Pope has called for governments to redistribute wealth to the poor. And Christine Lagarde, head of the International Monetary Fund, has declared that reducing inequality is a priority since she sees it as threatening the stability and sustainability of the world economic system. But what world leaders have not said is what they would do about it. And some people say that nothing can be done. But I don't believe that. And the key message is that the present levels of inequality are not inevitable. We're not at the mercy of forces outside our control. If we want to reduce inequality, and that's, of course, a big if we want to do so, then there are concrete steps we can take. They're not necessarily easy, and they have costs. We'd have to discard quite a lot of economic and political orthodoxy. But if our leaders are serious about tackling it, then they have to move outside their comfort zone and consider a wider agenda. Now, you're probably relieved that I've not accompanied my talk by a PowerPoint presentation. If I had, I would have probably had a slide which has the words economic and social, one above the other, with an arrow going from economic to social. And that is very much the way in which policy has tended to be made. It's the economic that has driven the social. And you see that in terms of government departments. I mean, the Treasury outranks the Department for Work and Pensions. But it's, in my view, the wider social objectives that should govern the formulation of policy. The arrow should run the other way, up, not down, in terms of my invisible slide. Economic goals should follow from the kind of society in which we should like to live. I should equally have emphasized that I'm not proposing a return to the 1970s with a socio and economic council limited to a tripartite representation from employers, trade unions, and government. Rather, I would see a wider body with representation from NGOs, from groups such as CPAG and Save the Children, from bodies such as the RSA, and from consumers as well as workers and employers. And this council, I feel, could advise on important issues as far as inequality is concerned, such as the level of the living wage, ethical pay policies, and trade agreements such as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. These are all subjects on which we need a national conversation, not decisions behind closed doors.